All right. So we have finished the WSRP convention. It is now over. We have results. And this is a real interesting report that I'll give. And I'm sure it's going to land me in hot water, but I don't care. I'm going to tell the truth from how I saw it. I'm going to tell you the facts that I know. And I'm going to tell you what I saw as a delegate on the ground the first day. I wasn't there the second day, but the second day is very factual. There wasn't a whole lot of interesting meat on the second day as far as information. It's second day. I'll tell you what the results were. The statewide results for Senate, Raul Garcia was endorsed, which is awesome. We interviewed him on this podcast. I think he is the right candidate to lead us to a potential victory against Maria Cantwell. I'm excited for Raul Garcia. Congratulations. For auditor, Matt Hawkins. For Secretary of State, Dale Whitaker. I don't know a whole lot about him. I spoke to him once. Seems like a reasonable guy. I don't know much about his campaign, but he is endorsed. Pete Serrano for Attorney General. Good job, everyone. I am excited. I think that he'll be a fantastic Attorney General, which will be a great breath of fresh air from our current Attorney General. Pete Serrano will defend your rights. Bob Ferguson has stomped on your rights. To give you a real world example, Bob Ferguson overturned the will of the people when they voted for $30 car tabs. He declared to the court, cried to his favorite judge, that, the people were confused when they voted. They were confused. They were too stupid to understand. And so they voted the wrong way. And it worked. So he overturned the will of the people. We need an attorney general that will defend the will of the people. And I'll tell you, Democrats, independents, he will defend the will of the people even if he doesn't love the result of the vote. The only time that he would sue is if it was something blatantly unconstitutional, like we declared that everybody had to give their houses up to the government. Okay, if you guys vote for that, which I doubt anyone would, but if that was to happen, then yeah, he would probably sue in that case. But he wouldn't sue because he didn't like how a car tabs vote went. He will defend our constitutional rights, and I really hope that Pete Serrano gets across the finish line. He'll be an outstanding candidate. Good job, everyone, on picking him. He got 100%. He was the only one of the statewide candidates who got 100% of the delegates. Um, this was an interesting one. Commissioner of Public Lands, which nobody pays attention to, ever. But it was interesting this time. So we had two candidates that were running for Commissioner of Public Lands. We had Sue Keel-Peterson, who ultimately won, and she was endorsed by a wide margin. I think it was 86%. I could be wrong. It was close. It was in the 80s. And Jamie Herrera Butler. For those of you who don't know who Jamie Herrera Butler is, she was the former congresswoman in the 3rd Congressional District. She was unseated by Joe Kent's campaign because of her vote to impeach Donald Trump and subsequent CNN interviews. I will say I'm really excited that Sue Keel-Peterson got endorsed. I love her. She's a sweet lady. I've had her on this podcast. She's great. And she is also the only actual scientist who's running. She's the only person who's qualified through education and life experience to actually do the job. Currently, we have a lawyer in charge of our public lands. Hillary Franz, people may like her. Obviously, they do like her in the state because they voted for her, but she's not really qualified for that job. That job is particularly science-based, and we actually have a scientist that's running, and I'm excited, and I hope she wins. And I'll be supporting her campaign, and I know many other people will be too. The other person, though, was Jamie Herrera Butler. So Sue Keel-Peterson gives her speech. It was a fine speech. Then she steps away, and then up next was Jamie Herrera Butler. Jamie Herrera Butler was viciously booed. And then people stood up and turned around and turned their backs on her while she was giving her speech. And when I say people, I don't mean a couple, I mean a lot. She also, and then all the signs for Sue Keel-Peterson just started showing up out of the woodwork. I mean, it was obvious how that was going to go. Now, I will say, I'm going to say two positive things about Jamie Herrera Butler. She did show up, which was brave, and she finished her speech. I'll tell you, I think I'm a pretty good speaker most of the time. I've spoken in unfavorable conditions before, but I don't think I could have gotten through a speech in that crowd. She did. I was impressed by that. And then I was glad that Sue Keel Peterson won. Um, and I wasn't glad that Sue won because I'm anti Jamie Hura Butler. I was glad that Sue won because Sue is a great lady and she is qualified for the job. I think the WSRP delegates made a wise decision, and I believe in Ms. Peterson. Look forward to talking to her again, and I hope she advances through the primary, and I hope she goes on to win the election. So then we had our governor race, which everyone knew was going to be the big deal. What we didn't know was how contentious that was going to get. I've been saying for a long time I suspected Semi Bird was going to win. Semi Bird did win. He did get the delegates. He won the WSRP endorsement for all it's worth. This is what happened. The committee that was in charge of doing background checks and vetting our candidates on April 12th, I believe, came out with a report saying that both Dave Reichert and Semi Bird were qualified and we could vote to endorse either one. Then the Seattle Times breaks a news story very recently about Semi Bird having an issue in his past. And I won't even get into it because I don't care about his past, but there is something I care about that I will get into. Immediately after we adopted our rules and we voted on all that, we voted. Well, when I say we, the delegates, the majority of the delegates voted to overturn the report. So there was a report that came out. Ultimately, they had determined at the WSRP that Semi Bird was not forthcoming in his answers to the questions, particularly the question, and I'm paraphrasing it, asked, is there anything in your past that we need to know about that is criminal or that might reflect badly on the WSRP for endorsing you? And the reason that question exists is so not so we can have a gotcha. I mean, a lot of people have stuff in their past. I have stuff in my past. And I'm a firm believer that your biggest mistake in life does not define who you are as a man. The issue was that Semi Bird said no. And they decided that that was an omission and a lie to the committee that he was asking to endorse it. So Lisa Evans, I believe her name is, came out to give the report. Now, this lady had nothing to do with the decision. She had nothing to do with the vote to determine that Semi Bird wasn't qualified. She was just there to give the report. And when she said that Semi Bird wasn't qualified and said that we weren't going to hold a vote to endorse for governor, to be fair to Semi Bird, and that we weren't going to be voting for Dave Reichert either, all hell broke loose. People were yelling and screaming and shouting at her and telling her she needed to leave and that she should vacate the chair. There's some people got really close to the stage and she took a step back and she was visibly scared. And I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed at the behavior of the delegates. I will defend the WSRP in some things. I will defend the decision that they made. I would have made the same decision if I was sitting there. I found out that Semi Bird had answered no, and then we find out that the Seattle Times just broke a story that you've admitted was a problem, that I won't get into, but you admitted was a problem, and you told me no, I would feel lied to. And that's what they did. And so they, after April 12th, when they got the new information, decided that he wasn't qualified. And I would have made that same decision if I was on that board. The issue that the WSRP screwed up, and they did screw it up royally, was they had that information for some time. They may not have taken the time to confirm it, but that's their problem. They should have confirmed it. They should have done this way earlier, and they had other stuff too. So if they were going to make that determination, they should have made this before April 12th. That would have given people time to discuss it, to understand what it was, to read it, and then make a determination of how they wanted to handle it at the convention without anyone feeling like they were being manipulated or lied to. Now, I'm going to say neither the Dave Reichert campaign nor the Semi Bird campaign had anything to do with that decision. The Dave Reichert campaign found out when the Semi Bird campaign found out. So the Dave Reichert campaign decided to pull out of the convention and no longer seek the endorsement after they determined that Semi Bird wasn't qualified. And the reason the Dave Reichert campaign was upset was because they determined that Semi Bird wasn't qualified because he was misleading, and so we won't endorse anybody. Well, the Reichert campaign felt that they were the only qualified person to be endorsed, and now they're being told they can't be endorsed. So they were flabbergasted. The Semi Bird campaign just found out that they weren't eligible to be endorsed, so they were upset. And so the Dave Reichert campaign, and I don't blame them one bit, pulled out and said, we no longer want to seek the endorsement. And Dave Reichert said, I'm not here to fix the party. I'm here to fix the state. That was a good statement. I totally understand why he made it, and I can get behind it. His job isn't to fix our party. His job is to fix the state if he gets elected. It is the chairman of the WSRP's job to fix the party, and I hope he makes some adjustments, and he makes them quickly, because there were some people who made some very serious mistakes, and it made people feel misled. And I know the hearts of the people in the WSRP were in the right place. Their brains were not. And unfortunately, we need your brains to be in the right place too, because it creates a problem like we had. Both campaigns were furious. And Dave Reichert withdrew. So my candidate, who I was supporting, okay, he's gone. So great. I wasn't particularly happy. But let me tell you why I am upset with the Semi Bird campaign. There's something that Semi Bird said. The way Semi Bird stoked the agitation, that really has upset me. I hope he apologizes for it. He won't. He doesn't. He's not an apologizing guy from what I've seen. But what happened was people started screaming at this poor lady who had nothing to do with it except to give the report, telling her she needed to leave, she needed to vacate, she was visibly scared. And like I said, I was embarrassed. And then I look at Semi Bird, who's in the room, and he is stoking it. He's telling everyone, yeah, keep going. And this woman is terrified. He didn't try to calm it down at all. He knew he had the room. He knew he was going to win the endorsement and this was going to get overturned, but he wanted her to be silent. He didn't want her to finish the report and explain why they made their decision. So the delegates never heard the reason they made their decision, because she was shouted down, and Semi Bird supported that. He didn't want the delegates in the room to know. I feel that's manipulative. I saw a completely different side of Semi Bird that day. I've always liked him. I've always said that I liked him. The reason that I was supporting Dave Reichert, and that decision came relatively recently, last few weeks, purely strategic. I wanted to beat Bob Ferguson. I still want to beat Bob Ferguson. Bob Ferguson will be a disaster for the state. He will make you miss Jay Inslee as a governor. And I know for those of you like me who think Jay Inslee is a wildly terrible governor, it may surprise you to learn that Bob Ferguson will be so bad that you will miss Jay Inslee. I promise you, you will. You'll miss the man. I believed Dave Reichert was the candidate who could win because he had a large number of donors. He had a good campaign set up. He had a good ground game planned. He has people on his finance committee who I have a great deal of respect for. He's got people in his camp who I know how to run campaigns. Jeff Harvey, for example, is a brilliant guy, and he's been able to maintain his campaign. He's been able to appeal to voters. He has wide name recognition. It was purely strategic. My goal was to keep Bob Ferguson out of office, which is why I support Dave Reichert. and I still do, by the way. It was never personal against Semi. I thought Semi was a phenomenal speaker. First time I heard him speak, I was impressed. And he is a phenomenal speaker. He's an eloquent speaker. And I was actually in the Semi Bird. I was in the tent. I was a Semi Bird supporter for a while. It was purely logistical reasons why I went to Dave Reichert. Now there's more reasons why I'm for Dave Reichert. Semi Bird, when that whole thing was going on, was encouraging people to continue screaming at that poor woman. And then he said something which has put me through the roof, and the longer I think about it and stew on it, I get more angry. He is recorded as saying out loud at the convention when they read that he wasn't qualified that this isn't 1960. What he was saying by saying this isn't 1960 is you're all a bunch of racists for not supporting me. He played the race card. He played the race card on the committee, who ended up endorsing him because the delegates were there, and basically implied that the people at the WSRP who made the decision because he wasn't forthcoming were racist. So because you failed to disclose what was in your background, and we don't need to go into it because I don't care what's in your background. I don't think that defines who you are. What does define who you are is your inability to accept responsibility for your answers on that questionnaire. You, Semi Bird, didn't take responsibility for your answers. You could have. You had the delegates in the room. You could have been like, I'm sorry, I forgot. I should have put it in there. I would have accepted that answer. And you had the votes in the room that would have said, we forgive you, Semi, and they did. And we could have moved on from it, and you would have been completely inoculated from it. It would be out. You've accepted responsibility, and you've accepted responsibility for your answer, and could have explained, oversight. I'd have accepted that answer. I like you, Semi. I want to like you, okay? But you did not accept responsibility for your answer and instead said this isn't 1960 and implied that the WSRP was a bunch of racists for enforcing their own rules. That agitated me. Still agitates me. I hope you apologize for it. And for you to say something like that is just, it tells me one of two things. Either you were manipulative and trying to play the race card, which is not a good look, or you don't understand basic history. The Republican Party is the party of civil rights. Lyndon Johnson became the face of civil rights, but it was the Republican Party that passed it in the House and the Senate. I am proud of the Republican Party's history in supporting civil rights. We are the party that ended slavery. We are the party that gave civil rights. We are the party that shot down Jim Crow laws. And you know that. If you don't know that, then you don't know enough history to be our governor and you should step down. I know you know that. So what you said was manipulative and it was wrong. And all they were doing was giving a report that you could have given an answer to. Instead of owning up to it, you played the race card, Semi. Didn't appreciate it, and I don't appreciate it. That's why I'm angry, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people think that I was just a sore loser. I'm not. I knew I was going to. I knew Semi Bird was going to get endorsed. I've been saying on this podcast, Semi Bird has the votes to get endorsed. He has been running a campaign to win over delegates. He hasn't been running a campaign to win the governor's race, but he has been running a campaign to win delegates, and he did, and he got the endorsement. And he did a good job of that. And I'll tell you what, he gave a really wonderfully eloquent speech when he got the endorsement. I do not hold Semi Bird's passed against him at all. And neither should anyone else. It was a long time ago. I have stuff in my past that is ugly. My biggest mistake does not define who I am as a man. And Semi's biggest mistake doesn't define who he is as a man. But it is important that we are honest. And the reason that question is there is so that the WSRP, it's not a gotcha question. It's not a, oh, there's something in your past, you're done. It's a question so that they know how to support you, so that they can inoculate you from any issues that may arise, so they can defend you. If it was an oversight, I wish you would have just said that on your questionnaire. And I don't know if it was or it wasn't. If you say, if Semi says, he hasn't mentioned it yet, but if Semi was to tell me it was an oversight, I didn't put it on there because I just didn't think about it because it was so long ago, I'll accept that answer as fact. I won't question it. And I would accept, and that's an acceptable answer. What wasn't acceptable was you didn't even let the information come out, and you stoked what was probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen Republicans do. That poor woman up there, I was scared for. And then you play the race card. That really, it's not a good look. The reasons I support Dave Reichert, still do, are the same reasons. Dave Reichert has raised a lot more money. He has a campaign staff that can win. He has the name recognition to win. The WSRP, their endorsement is not a command. We are not slaves to our party. We will make our own decisions come August. And as of right now, my vote is for Dave Reichert. Dave Reichert has had votes in Congress that I do not love, and I've said that on this podcast. He is not as conservative as I am. But he's not, he is a Republican. He will defend my rights as a governor if he gets elected. And he can beat Bob Ferguson. The reason I am passionate about this election is because I do not want Bob Ferguson to become our governor. And I'm telling you guys, many of you do know what a disaster it would be. Maybe some of you don't know what a disaster it would be if Bob Ferguson is our governor. It will not be the same old, here comes year 48 of the same old, same old. This man will trample your rights like you would not believe. Bob Ferguson is your nightmare. Many of you, I may also be forced to leave this state to escape tyranny if Bob Ferguson is your governor. Dave Reichert has proven to me that he has the campaign, he has the credibility and the name recognition to stop that from happening. For that reason, he has my vote. If Semi Bird wins the primary, I will fall in line and I will vote and support Semi Bird. And I encourage everyone who's supporting Reichert to do the same thing if that should happen. And I will get on this podcast and I will encourage everyone to vote for Semi Bird. Because we cannot have Bob Ferguson as our governor. But I believe our best chance to prevent Bob Ferguson from being our governor is Dave Reichert. For that reason, Dave Reichert has my vote. Semi, I really hope that you apologize. The first day of the convention was not my favorite cup of tea. I didn't make the second day of the convention, and some people in my party are mad at me about that. They think it's because I didn't get my way and that I'm being a sore loser. That's not what happened. The second day was going to be a foregone conclusion for all the endorsements. These endorsements were overwhelming. My vote wasn't needed, and we had alternates to back me up. And the first day, my congressional candidate that I am supporting and I'm actively involved in his campaign, Nirav Sheth, was endorsed. And it has basically made it a foregone conclusion that he will be the Republican nominee and that we are now going to have to shift our phase from the primary to the general. And my time was better spent focusing on getting us that congressional seat. And if anyone feels that I should have been there to sit there and have everything happen exactly the same way it was and not support our candidate, I do apologize. I'm not trying to offend you, but we did have an alternate to take my place. I did inform the chairman that I wasn't going to be making it the next day, the night before. But everything worked out exactly the way I predicted it would work out. Semi Bird did get the endorsement, and I'm going to tell you, we've gone into what happens. Now let's go into what it means. Nothing. The WSRP endorsement isn't going to help Semi Bird at all. It's not going to help his financial woes. They don't have any money to give him. Now, many of the donors who have been donating heavily to the WSRP that keep it afloat are Dave Reichert supporters, and they're not going to donate to the WSRP until after the primary. So I am concerned about the WSRP potentially going bankrupt. Now, that's not Semi Bird's fault. Semi Bird's job was to run to win, and he did that. It's not Semi Bird's fault if the WSRP goes bankrupt. That is a problem that I'm seeing in the WSRP in fundraising. And it's just one of those things, right? I mean, the candidate that many of our major donors is not the endorsed candidate. So for the time being, they're just not going to donate to the party, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it rolls. So we have to keep an eye on the WSRP's funds and make sure that they don't go bankrupt, which they're dangerously close to having a problem. So the Semi Bird campaign is going to have to fix its own financial issues. WSRP can help in some ways. They can take major donations. If somebody maxes out to Semi Bird, for example, in their donations, they can donate to the WSRP and ask that it be donated to Semi Bird. The WSRP can forward that money, but that's still Semi Bird raising the money. It's not going to be the WSRP raising the money for him. And they wouldn't have done it for Dave Reichert either. They just don't have the ability to do that. The Dave Reichert campaign is now going to have to kind of run against the WSRP and paint Semi Bird as the establishment candidate, which he is now. He is the establishment candidate. The establishment has decided Semi Bird is the candidate. So Semi Bird is the establishment candidate. So Reichert is now going to run as the Maverick outsider. And that might be effective for him, actually. It'll appeal more to independent voters and Democrats who are looking for a way out. So the primary, I still suspect, is going to go heavily for Dave Reichert simply because of name recognition. Many people outside of our circle, the people who are at the delegation and that aren't PCOs, do not know who Semi Bird is. And the only news that they're going to get about Semi Bird is going to be what the media gives them. And since he has an R next to his name, it's all going to be negative. So I still think Dave Reichert pulls this out. If he doesn't, I will support Semi Bird. I give everyone my word. Unless something unbelievable that I cannot imagine was to come out, which I don't think will happen. And even if it did, I'm still not going to support Bob Ferguson. I'll be looking for anybody but Bob Ferguson at that point, too. So we are now divided. The party is divided for the next couple of months in a primary in a way that it hasn't been before because the WSRP has never endorsed a candidate this early in a contested primary that's this contested. So this is going to be a new thing for us. I suspect it's not going to have that much of an effect on the primary. So what's next? What's next is we are still having a governor's race. Dave Reichert's still running. He still has an amazing campaign. Semi Bird has run his race to win the nomination. Now he needs to shift to run his race to win the primary, which it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough transition for him. So we will see what happens. I am still supporting Dave Reichert. I think Dave Reichert's still got it in the bank. I think this is going to be a Dave Reichert, Bob Ferguson race. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Bob Ferguson isn't our next governor. So that's the update. If I've offended anyone, I am sorry. That is what I saw with my eyes. That is how I feel. I expect I'm going to hear a lot of comments from people. There'll be more updates to follow and more podcasts in the future. Look forward to talking to you guys next time.